Hey, welcome back to another episode of Elijah's Bones Productions here. I have decided, I thought the best title would come out Dr. Comeback. Since I got an answer for everything, you just call me Dr. Comeback. Today we're going to have kind of a long um, little discussion on the Millennium. I think I need to do something first. Okay, that's better. I had to adjust my lighting just a little bit. And I got to go to work in a couple of hours, so I've got plenty of time here. Yeah, a couple hours might be right. Today we're dealing with Millennium, and of course, I'm giving it to you from a historical premill um, position. And you've seen the box, the chart, and all of that. And, well, we're going to be looking at something. And then coming up right afterwards, I'm going to be doing a little short snippet here on Don Preston uploaded responding to Steve Gregg, No Marrying, and the Resurrection. I could have swore I'd done something on this already and talked about it, but I know maybe I'll be able to throw it up on his things if I have. Um, this is my channel, of course, and the Olivet second appearing at the cross. Let's see. I'm looking through my different. No, there's a lot more, but I can do it again. Not a problem at all. But today we're dealing with Revelations 20, and a lot of this was put in my book. You would find a lot of these argumentations and things dealt with in this. And so we're first. That's what we're going to do. We're going to take our time, go through Revelations 20. Now, we know that Revelations 19 has been admitted by full preterists that this is the second coming. This is the marriage supper of the Lamb. They believe it happened in 70 AD, and we believe it is still yet future for many details in there that we have talked about, such as the beast was captured and the false prophet were done in, and the armies of this beast were completely defeated and destroyed, which is a complete contradiction to 70 AD, and spiritualizing it just does not work. But we have by the basically from by the working of the beast. I'll show you this what I'm talking about in Second Thessalonians. He talks about, okay, has that day come? As day of the Lord. Where is that? How do we know that day has come, or is it past, or something like that? So now, concerning the coming of the Lord Christ and our being gathered in Him, we ask you, brothers, not to be quickly shaken, mind alarmed, spirit spoken word, that the effect of the day of the Lord has come. Let no one deceive you anyway, for that day will not come unless the rebellion comes first, and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction, who opposes and exalts himself against every so God or object of worship, and he takes a seat in the temple of God, proclaiming himself to be God. Now that doesn't necessarily mean the temple, but tries to place himself in the place of God. It can be interpreted that way. Then First Thessalonians, or was I thinking? Oops, no. Let's go back. Second Thessalonians 2, 8 and 9. For the mysterious of lawlessness is already work, only he knows restrains him, and then the lawless will be revealed, who the Lord Jesus will what? Kill with the breath of his mouth, and bring to nothing by the appearance of his coming. The appearing, or the coming, the parousia, that word, of the lawless one is by the activity of Satan, with all power and false signs and wonders. That's exactly what we've got in Revelation 19 with the false beast, how he came. That's all recorded in Revelation 13. And so at the coming of Christ, the beast and the false prophet are killed. And that again is what says right here. Those who worshipped his image and all that were killed, the beast. So we start with 20 with the binding of Satan. Now, the question is, First of all, when did this binding takes place, and what is it? Now, I would want to start with what is a binding. Now, most people go back to Matthew 10, I believe it is, for the binding of the strong man, and they put the two of them together. But I don't see anywhere in here where it's being described of somebody just being bound. Um, Angel comes down from out of heaven with the key to a bottomless pit. The bottomless pit is talked about before. When Jesus cast out demons, they would respond to him and say, "Please don't throw us into the pit. Don't command us to go." So is that pit literal? I believe it is. Can you be thrown into it? Yes. And so here's the angel. He sees the dragon, the ancient serpent, who's the devil, Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. So he was thrown into a pit, shut it, sealed it over him, so that he might not deceive the nations any longer until the 1,000 years were ended. Now, in verse 7, and when the 1,000 years are ended, Satan will be released from his prison. So this is a prison. You get bound up, you get thrown into prison, sealed up, covered over, locked in there. You ain't coming out. And what's the point? Not to deceive the nations any longer. Well, okay, so he was deceiving the nations before, wasn't he? He's the one who deceived them into bringing in the beast, the false prophet, all of those things that happen by the signs and wonders. He's the one who called it. So if it's saying any longer, then he's no longer going to be able to do that, and he was stopped. So the question is, if he's being stopped from deceiving the nations, and this began in 33 AD, we have a problem. Because you can't tell me, and one of the biggest examples of the deception that he has created would start with in 600s with Islam. That is followed up by some of the other world's false religions, but mostly by Mormonism, Jehovah's Witness. Those are all considered deceptions, and peoples are being deceived. But Islam is the biggest one of how many nations? That is a complete deception. So if you want to tell me that Satan is bound from deceiving people, well, see, you can bind someone up. He still has the freedom to talk. Binding has nothing to do with stopping him from deceiving people. That is binding up authority he has to do what? Well, he has the ability still to deceive nations, so that was never bound up. So those things just don't work. They just don't work, people. It has to be a literal, so he can't do it anymore. And I got a little Facebook thing I'm looking at. Well, oh, never mind. I'll pay attention here. So no, there's no way that we're just talking about being bound of his authority. It has to be him being bound. He's being stopped from deceiving the world. And that could not have happened between 33 and now. It's something that has to happen. So this 1,000 years begins with this binding, and then he's released at the end of the 1,000 years. That's plain and simple. All right, in the next scene, I saw thrones, and seated on them who were the authority to judge was committed. I also saw the souls of those who had been beheaded in the testimony of Jesus for the word of God, who didn't worship the beast and the image and not received its mark in their foreheads. They were killed. So these people are being killed during the tribulation, correct? They came to life. So after they've been killed by beheading, they came to life, and they're going to now do what? Reign with Christ for 1,000 years. So Satan's bound. This resurrection takes place, and these people are going to reign with him for the 1,000 years. And the rest of the dead, of course, do not come to life until the 1,000 years were ended. So it was only those people who are what? Christian. The dead in Christ shall rise first. That is the first resurrection of dead people coming back to life and reigning with him for the full 1,000 years. Blessed and holy is the ones who share in that first resurrection, for over such the second death has no power. Now, Augustine and others, of course, want to make that first resurrection called being born again, but people that are beheaded in heaven, coming to life is not them being born again, because they're in heaven. That means they are saved, and that means they came to life here on earth, and they reigned with him for 1,000 years. I don't know how many I'm presenting this, and I don't see anybody can do it. Now, if you want to take it and make it all figurative language, you've got to explain that to me. But the issue will always be is that I don't care who you are. You want to interpret spiritually. Your view is going to be different from this person and this person. It goes through because there is no set idea of what this literally means. So it's open to interpretation in a spiritual way for everybody and anybody, and that's exactly what happens. But if you take it literally, of an event of Satan being thrown into a prison and this time period happening after they have been raised, after the resurrection, which means after the second coming, that demands that the 1,000 years is literal and follows after the second coming. So when the 1,000 years are ended, Satan will be released from his prison. So he's being released. He's not, got to get it, he's not being unbound. And he'll come out to deceive the nations that are at the four corners of the earth. Again, Gog and Magog to gather them for battle. Their numbers are like the sand of the sea. So people have populated. There are people all over. Now, it's been 1,000 years since the first coming. And they marched up over the broad plain of the earth and surrounded the camp of the saints, which we know is not 70 AD. We know it was not the camp of the saints that they fled in 70 AD. And then fire came down from heaven, as 2 Peter talks about. Fire comes down from heaven and consumes them. All these armies, all these people. And the devil who had been deceived them, so this is what the devil did. He deceived them to do what? Go march against Jesus and against Israel, against the people of God that were there in the city. And the devil who had deceived them was thrown to a lake of fire where the beast and the false prophet were. Now that word is not necessarily there in the original languages, in the Greek, but the idea is that the beast and false prophet, they were taken care of in 19. There's no sense that this 1,000 years there's this beast and false prophet who are doing the deceiving. It is Jesus himself. Whoa, sorry about that. It is Satan himself is doing the deceiving and gathering these people, and not the beast and the false prophet. So they've got to be already thrown in, because that's what happened at the second coming. They were both thrown into the lake of fire alive, and they will be tormented day and night and day forever and ever and ever. Now the torment, let's get that. The torment is absence from life in God. That's all that is. Being tormented. Imagine that there's no hope. You have no hope or chance of ever being free from wherever you're at. If it's a lake of fire, literally, that's fine. If it's just emptiness, empty space, whatever it might be, the torment, it's going to last forever and ever. It doesn't stop. It doesn't end. Lots more to say about those kind of things, but that is the heart and the soul of the idea of the millennium. The different objections, of course, based on those two things, interpreting it spiritually and claiming that Satan is bound spiritually, just doesn't fit the events of what has happened since 33 AD. Doesn't work. The deception that's gone out in this world and has continued to do so is just, for example, what is the first thing he does is he gathers people to go attack Jerusalem. Well, what's been happening now that Jerusalem became a nation? What continues to happen? People gathering, nations gathering against her, going after, trying to well, why are they going after Israel? Deceptions. Satan deceives them, and they want their destruction. Israel didn't do anything wrong to them, but they want them destroyed, and that's because of satanic influence. Let's see. The other thing is they want to argue that this is recapitulation. And amil, post-mail, meaning from 33 AD on. And the main argument there are those two things about the first resurrection is those that were beheaded during the tribulation. So they cannot start to reign until after the tribulation, until they are raised, and that is the first at the first coming. Nor is Satan just as authority bound. It's just impossible for that to happen. And so that's basically what we get. Those basic arguments. Steve Gregg likes to go down and say, well, the second coming is here in verse 9, 10. Verse 9, fire comes down and they consumed them and all that. But the different wordings here. And then the camp of the saints. That word there is barracks of the saints. Where do we saints as an army? And Jerusalem becoming the barracks. What are we talking about? Well, Revelation 19, where does Christ return to Jerusalem? His feet will stand on the Mount of Olives when he comes. And so that's basically the idea of what happens at his coming and what the millennium is, why we say that. Now, if we go back, one of the things we'd have to go back and look at real closely too. I see this way. Now, we know a lot about the passage during this time that they will, well, let's look it up real quick, how many passages there's. Swords, plowshares. How many times is this repeated through scriptures? Joel 3, they'll beat your plowshares into swords. Isaiah 2:4, they will beat their swords into plowshares, pruning hooks. Micah 4:3. Yeah, that's kind of the basic thing when you go through there. But each one of those then would be talking about the millennium. And if we look at Isaiah 2 and 4, let's look at the chapter a little bit. The mountain of the Lord. The word that Isaiah the son of Amos says concerning Judah and Jerusalem. It shall come to pass in the latter days that the mountain of the house of the Lord shall be established as the highest of the mountains. Okay, established as the highest of the mountains. When you go to Zechariah 14, it talks about an earth that lifts up Jerusalem and Mount Zion. And shall be lifted above the hills. Zechariah 14. Many people shall come say, come, let us go to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of God or Jacob, that he may teach us his ways and we may walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law, and from the word of the Lord from Jerusalem he shall judge between the nations, and shall decide disputes for many peoples. And they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into prunings. Nation shall lift up sword against nation, not lift up. Neither shall they learn war any more. That's a description of the millennium. The other one, let's go here. Let me go there. When we talk about 64 and 65, of course, 65, 66, let me do that. Judgment and salvation belongs to the Lord. For behold, I create a new heavens and a new earth. The former things shall not be remembered or come into mind, but be glad and rejoice forever in which I create. For behold, I create Jerusalem to be joy and her people to be gladness. And I will rejoice in Jerusalem and be glad in my people. So this is not the new Jerusalem. This has to be Jerusalem here that he's creating, and he's creating something new. No more shall there be heard the sound of weeping and the cry of distress. Jerusalem shall dwell in security. That is again Zechariah 12. No more shall there be in it an infant who lives but a few days. There's no more death like that in the sense of sickness and disease. I think it all goes away. Or an old man who does not fill out all his days. So yeah, there's still death. People will still die, but they will live for their full days. And the young man shall die 100 years old, and the sinner 100 years old shall be accursed. Yeah, because you're living 100 years without being saved, right? So there's sinners there. This is describing the survivors of the nations who came against Jerusalem on the day of that battle. Zechariah 14:16 will come year after year to worship the Lord of hosts. They will build houses and inhabit them. They shall plant vineyards and eat their fruit. They shall build and another and not build and another inhabit. They shall not plant and another eat. For like the days of the tree shall all the days of my people be. For my children shall long enjoy their work of their hands. They shall not labor in vain or bear children for calamity. For they shall be the offspring of the blessed Lord and their descendants with them. Oh, there's going to be such a blessing. And that is basically what I'm arguing for, is why these two talk about the millennium kingdom. But this one to my look. He who is humble and contrite in spirit. He who slaughters an ox is like one who kills a man. He who sacrifices a lamb like one who breaks a dog's net. So there's no sacrifices going. Grain offerings, pig's blood. They have their chosen their own, and their soul delights in their abominations. There will be wicked people. But again, rejoice, because before she was in labor, she gave birth. Before pain came upon her, she delivered a son. Who has heard such a thing? Shall a land be born in one day? 1948. Shall a nation be brought forth in one moment? For as soon as Zion will in labor, she brought forth her children. Again, the words, rejoice with Jerusalem, be glad for her, all you who love her. Rejoice with her and joy, all you mourn over her, that you may be nursed and be satisfied. I will expend my peace to her like a river, and the glory be of the nations like an overflowing stream. You'll be carried upon her hip, as mother comforts you. Your bones shall flourish like the grass, and the hand of the Lord will be known to certainty shall show his indignation against the enemies. For the Lord will come in fire, and his chariots like a whirlwind, to render anger and fury, and his rebuke with flames of fire. For by fire will the Lord enter into judgment by his sword with all flesh, and those slain by the Lord shall be many. There's Revelations 20 right there. Was it 10, 11? Those who sanctify purge themselves, going or following one in the midst, eating pig's flesh, and come to end together. Nope. See, those people ain't going to work. That's not going to happen. And they shall declare my glory among the nations. They bring all your brothers from all the nations an offering to the Lord, on horses and in chariots and in leaders and on mules. And some of them will also I will take for priests and for Levites, said the Lord. A new people, priesthood, is what he's talking about there. For as the new heavens and the earth that I make shall remain before me, said the Lord, so shall your offspring and your name remain. From new moon to new moon, from Sabbath to Sabbath, all flesh shall come to worship before me, declares the Lord. Again, Zechariah 14:16. And they shall go out and look on the dead bodies of Revelations 19, who rebelled against me, for their worm shall not die, their fire shall not be quenched, and they shall be an abhorrence to all flesh. So you look at those things and you go, yeah, that can very, of course it's a perspective, but you can see how it fits Revelations 20 and puts it in there, and it's talking about everything being new with Christ ruling here on earth. And then, of course, Satan being released at the end of that 1,000 years, to seize these people who have been living, giving birth, growing up, which kind of goes to show you, because here, think about this. They go through thousands of years with Israel and the nations, and no real revelations to the nations other than, oh, Israel exists. I mean, and Abraham, those things were, they have a God, and people could choose to come and be part of that God and that nation if they wanted to. And then the church, Jesus comes and makes this broad declaration of anybody who believes in him can come. So there's this type of a gathering, a dispensation, whatever you want to call it. There's this time frame of this happening, but still God hasn't shown up in the sense of, he didn't show up in the Old Testament with other nations. Here he did to a group of people in the New Testament, but it was not this worldwide event. And then in his second coming, it's a worldwide event. Every eye will see him. Everybody will know that he has come. And that changes everything again. Um, and it's validation for all of Israel. It's a validation for all of Christianity. It exposes all the other religions as being false automatically because it's the Lord who comes and shows up, and everything else is seen for what it is. The deception, the blinders are taken off their eyes. They can see now things for what it is. And so here he is. He's living a time period where there is no tribulations. And don't people say, well, if you could just make life better for me, I would believe. If it was just this way, I would believe. Okay, so he makes it that way for 1,000 years. No wars, no sicknesses, disease. All of those things have gone away. You've got literally the resurrected ones living with him, who are immortal and perishable, living alongside of those who are not. They can see, but still again, at the end of this time period when Satan is alive, he still can deceive people. He can still, if he could deceive Adam and Eve at the beginning, then he can even deceive Christians today who are now convinced he doesn't exist and so forth. Then even, it kind of proves the fact that even if people lived with Jesus himself, ruling from Jerusalem, and people could see him, and everything was validated of all of history of Christianity, and people will still reject him. That's what it goes to show. And it's just crazy to think that people will do that, would do it, even though they could see him. But that's kind of a general idea of what I see of this 1,000 years and its purpose. Again, it goes back to the depravity of man. Even in the light of seeing God, people will still deny him. Okay, of course I didn't go on for hours and hours and hours, but this is basically the revelation, what talks about the millennium. I want to keep it just short on that. That way people can ask questions and look at it. But this is basically how I see Revelation 20 and the millennial kingdom. It is Christ who comes at his coming and establishes. This is the restoration of Israel. This is Acts 1, the time that has been fixed for the restoration of Israel, all things being restored, and Christ himself has come down to sit on the seat of on the throne of his father David. He gets to sit there and rules from Jerusalem over the restored Israel and millennium period. That is the historical premill position. Okay, thank you guys for listening. And of course, that's what I said. This is what this is for, as a reference. When people ask, hey, what is the millennium in history? Here we go. This is it. You can point them to this little short half-hour presentation. In our next one, it'll be a snippet, of course, smaller one, when we talk about the judgment before the great white throne. That will be next. Okay, guys, you guys have a good night.